All right, welcome everybody. We are at 10:31. We'll give another minute or two. We've still got people joining, and then we will go ahead and get kicked off this month. All righty, is everyone seeing the screen slides? Great. Okay, well, welcome to the April meeting of the Kansas City Coalition for Digital Inclusion. We are a group of collaborators who are all dedicated towards this mission of facilitating collaboration among the organizations and initiatives working in our community to bridge the digital divide in order to maximize the resources for the greatest impact. The hope collectively of our coalition members and meeting attendees is for every citizen and household in the Kansas City metropolitan area to have access to the internet, the equipment needed to use it, and the skills to take advantage. Our content is moderated by a steering council that includes myself. I'm Deacon with KC Digital Drive, Carrie Coogan, who is at the Kansas City Public Library, Tom Esselman with PCs for People, and Ina Montgomery with Urban Tech. And of course, we are always open to suggestions and content sort of needs from the coalition members and the people who are at our meetings. We want to hear from folks what sorts of content you're looking for and what we can bring to these meetings, and if there are other ways that we can facilitate connections or help to support you in your work, that is really what we're here to do. So please reach out to any of us. We also encourage you to join the coalition. It is a lightweight commitment. There is a membership form at digitalinclusionkc.org/join. We invite a brief intro from our members. So one of the benefits that you get when you join is a chance to introduce yourself for a few minutes to this group. And we'll get to our new member intro in a minute. One more point on our content. Well, actually, I'll come back to content in a minute before we start. There are a few ways that you can connect with us. You can connect with the steering council members individually. There is an email address if you want to talk to Wendy at the library. There's a library email address. We've got a website, digitalinclusionkc.org, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So before we get into our panel today, I do want to, and sorry, I got to see if we've got everyone online. Is Pam Rooks online?
Hi.
Yes, she is.
I'm here.
So Pam, before we get into our panel session, I will have you do your member intro. I don't know if you have slides to share.
I do. Thanks.
Okay, great. So we'll have Pam share slides. If there is anyone who this is your first time showing up at a coalition meeting, if you want to put a note in the chat, I will call on you after, because we usually have ask for new people to kind of raise their hands and just say hello and who they are. So we will do that after Pam gives a little bit more detailed member intro on Catholic Charities. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, so I think that you can share yours.
Okay. Oops, let me put this in slideshow mode. Okay, so thank you for having me for starters. I'm Pam Rooks. I'm from Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas. And we are a ministry of the Archdiocese of Kansas City, dispensing love and hope to our neighbors throughout our 21 county service area. We offer a wide range of specialized program and services for people of all ages. We help with immediate survival needs, including food, clothing, and shelter. We educate, give guidance, and provide resources that will result in long-term change. And all of our services provided are based on need and not religion, race, or nationality. Within that, I work in digital access. And so our digital access and literacy programs are focused specifically on our clients who are refugees. Catholic Charities is the largest refugee resettlement site in Kansas, assisting with the relocation of nearly 400 refugees each year who are forced to flee their homelands because of persecution. For our refugees, we offer individualized assistance, especially for those who are adjusting to digital culture. We have people coming in, especially right now, from parts of Africa, the Congo region especially, as well as Afghanistan, and also a lot of Ukrainian refugees. And I work mostly with the Afghanistan and the Swahili speakers. One of the most frequented services we perform is helping people with online bill paying. That's a huge obstacle that we've encountered, is just getting them to where they can understand what their bills are and how to pay them through their phones or through the internet. We also assist clients in setting up equipment and access as far as getting computers, internet access, phones. We set them up with the Affordable Connectivity Program and kind of help them navigate all of that. We also bring classes in basic computer use to our refugees in their own languages. And why we joined the coalition, we have learned a lot of extremely valuable information in the time that we've been here, which hasn't been very long, just a few months, but has been enormously helpful to us. We've had 2 micro interns from Parker Dewey so far who have been incredibly helpful. Wouldn't have known anything about that without the coalition. We have also been awarded recently we were one of the ones who was awarded the Digital Equity Project from the Kansas City Regional COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund. Also wouldn't have known about that without the coalition. So we were very grateful for all of the tons of information and very useful and relevant information that we've received. Just attending the meetings, hearing other groups' experiences has been really enlightening, as well as all the wonderful support we've gotten from Leslie Scott. So we look forward to learning more and being a part of this creative and important work in social equity. And thank you so much for having us and for your time.
Thank you so much, Pam, and
you.
welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
One other quick, we've got one community announcement to bump up, because Amy Vandevelde, who is the NTIA state director from Missouri, wanted to just briefly introduce the request for comment that NTIA is seeking on the Digital Equity Act legislation. Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So NTIA has an open request for comment, and if some of you I know were at Net Inclusion, NDIA's annual conference, where Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said it's really important to hear from everyone out in the field, how we should spend this digital equity money. So our leadership at NTIA, Secretary Raimondo, Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson, will read these comments and take your input seriously. And I feel like the advantage that Missouri has is that we have been particularly in Kansas City, you all have been talking about digital inclusion and digital equity for quite some time. So I feel like this is an opportunity for Missouri to take the lead on making comments about how to make digital equity programs that will work for every Missourian and therefore every American, because other states may not have the ability don't have coalitions formed, don't have these communication networks set up. So if there's any way you can visit the request for comment site, I will make sure that all of this information gets disseminated to you. I'll put some of it in the chat. It's really as easy as either sending an email to an address or visiting a website and filling in a web form. It's not something complicated, but you do need internet access to be able to do it. So I'll put links in the chat, And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to me. But we are also having 3 listening sessions. So you could come and give your voice live to a listening session if you wanted to do that. But I'll make sure that all of that information is disseminated for all those links. And thanks for making time for this today, Aaron.
Thank you, Amy. Just a quick ad, and Kansas organizations also.
Oh, yes.
So
Thank you.
Melinda is not on today, although she joins us sometimes. We do have a lot of Kansas content. So
no, and I see Morgan. So Kansas also has an organized broadband offices and out on their stakeholder listening tour. So I think Missouri and Kansas are well positioned to help other people in other rural and metro areas understand the digital inclusion needs, because other states don't have their broadband offices set up. So that's perfect. Thank you for mentioning that.
And I will move just a related announcement. We do community announcements at the end. Usually we are doing right after this from noon to 12:30. We have and Leslie Scott will put another link in the chat if you haven't gotten it. But we're hosting a follow-up session really just on that request for comment. So we are kind of figuring out what for us as an organization is best to do, but also how to best support people and if we want to think about collective comments. So if anyone wants to join to discuss this RFC opportunity right after this meeting at 12, we've got a separate Zoom link for that, and we will have that discussion.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, we've got a couple more new members or first-time attendees that I would invite to just say hello. And if you are not a first-time attendee, it would be great if you can add your organization to the participant list. If you can just rename yourself so that these new folks can kind of look through and scroll and see who is here. But Erica, would you like to just say hello real quickly?
Sure. Hi, Erica Andrade, Chief Program Officer with El Centro. We are a Latino serving organization that serves both Wyandotte and Johnson County.
Great, welcome. And Alan Spell from MU.
Hi, I'm Alan Spell from the University of Missouri here in Columbia, and I'm thankful for Leslie for inviting me to this meeting. And I later on will talk a little bit about the broadband survey that we have out right now.
All righty, fantastic. Well, with that, I want to go ahead and get to our panel. I had kind of mentioned up front, when we were meeting at the end of last year as a steering council and kind of thinking about what sort of content seemed to be appropriate and in demand for this year. One of the things that kept coming up is an interest in being more regional and representative in the kinds of stories that we share and tell. And that includes, the folks that we invite to be members in the coalition and how we provide value to those members. So we had earlier in the year a presentation from the Community Action Agency in Belton about some of the work they were doing with seniors in Cass County. I will look forward a little bit. I think in July, we're looking at a panel with some folks from the City of Liberty, both the city itself and the school district and some of the community work that they're doing. But today we are really lucky to have a wide group of kind of cross-sectional stakeholders from Southern Johnson County and Miami County. And I will really let them tell their story. Janet McRae is the Director of Economic Development for Miami County and has been at the broadband game for a very long time. Mayor Joe Berkey from the city of Spring Hill is relatively newer in that role, but Spring Hill also has a really long story of how they've been working to bring broadband to that community. So we're going to start off with some remarks and kind of some history around those stories from Janet and Joe. Then we've got a provider panel. We have John Terry from QuickCom, David Soffer from WANRAC, Carly Baraga-Werner from Comcast, and Chase Custer with MoCan Communications. All have been part of this grant process, and both with the capital projects funds and the incoming BEAD funds, trying to figure out how, from a provider standpoint, they can build the infrastructure to serve these areas. And so we've got some feedback from them. And then finally, Morgan Barnes from the state broadband office, who is a regular here. And so we appreciate her coming back to provide the state context. So we will do that for the next hour or so, and then wrap up with some community announcements. So without further ado, I'm going to have you, Janet, I think you've got some slides, so I'm going to stop share here, and I will have you start on the community side with an intro to the Miami County story.
Sure. I'm still not able to share my screen, so if you want to give me that power.
Let's see if I have the power to give you that power,
I
or
think
if
I-
Wendy does. One of us will.
Did it pop up? Great. So I think it's important, first of all, to talk a little bit about Miami County and Spring Hill and where we're located. Not everybody has had a chance to visit our fabulous community, but we are in that southern portion of the Kansas City metro area in that ring. We have about 35,000 residents. We have kind of the big four cities: Lewisburg, Osawatomie, Paola, Spring Hill. About a third of Spring Hill is actually within our county, but I never want to forget our fabulous town of Fontana, because I'm going to talk about them a couple of times. 216 people, so definitely our smallest community in Miami County, also in a very hard area to serve. And so I wanted you to have a perspective of kind of where we were and the size of communities that we have. Really, until the early 2000s, we struggled with providers. We had basically some high-speed DSL, some cable providers. Fontana had cable and Suddenlink, and then phone and CenturyLink. We had MoCan Communications over in Lewisburg. And then again, that phone and DSL service in Osawatomie. Paola is our only community that is on AT&T. And so that also makes them a little bit more interesting when it comes to having battles about things. But if it wasn't high-speed DSL and cable until the early 2000s, we didn't have a lot of options in Miami County. Now what we've been able to do, CenturyLink still is about the primary option there in Fontana, but Lewisburg now has MoCan Communications with fiber in that area. People's Telecommunications has come in and done fiber throughout much of the city of Lewisburg and then the southern area. And then Optimum, which is the cable provider that used to be Suddenlink, is now Optimum. They have gone in the last 18 months and put fiber within community. So if you start looking at our areas, Lewisburg is actually very well served now, particularly when it comes to high-speed internet. Osawatomie has QuickCom that has gone in and put fiber to the home in much of that area. Paola has AT&T still with their DSL service. QuickCom is now building out about the northern half of the city of Paola. So that construction's underway. And then they still have the cable provider in Optimum. Spring Hill has been able to secure Brightspeed. It is now what was CenturyLink, but then Clearwave has come in new and is currently building out fiber to the home there. Comcast doing fiber to the home in Spring Hill, and then Optimum is the cable provider there. And a lot of those came with a lot of pain, but I wanted to maybe start out with the perspective that we didn't have a lot. We're being able to get more. We're excited about some of those partners that we've been able to attract to the area. And I also don't want to overlook Kansas FiberNet, because Kansas FiberNet has come in, built a backbone, but they did also really target those business providers and not our homes. And so in some ways that was great, but it also did cherry pick some customers that made it a little bit harder for some of those other service providers to come in. And then Go Brawley came in doing point-to-point wireless in our area. And I think that has been very helpful in our rural areas. And they really spurred some of what you see going on there in Lewisburg. So currently right now in 2023, what we've got going on is Brightspeed building out in Osawatomie, and then they'll do Spring Hill in 2024. So they're replacing DSL service there with fiber to the home. Clearwave and Comcast both doing fiber to the home in Spring Hill. QuickCom doing fiber in Paola. MoCan received one of the larger grants from the state for fiber to the home. So they will be in the unincorporated portion of Miami County, and construction has already begun on that. And then we have Peoples doing fiber to the home in the Lewisburg and in the southeast quadrant of the county. So a lot of fiber going on in a lot of different ways. So really our role, or my role as the economic development director for Miami County pre-COVID, was having those zoning discussions and having right away and access conversations. Yesterday, we were able to host the Kansas roadshow on broadband. And even there, we were still hitting on pole share agreements. What we can do about access, not just in the right of ways, but on poles and whatever we can to expedite the process as it moves forward. So we've worked on hosting forums. We've certainly had lots of conversations with the Office of Broadband, have had great relationships with them where, for instance, when Spring Hill was coming and doing some of their things, they were able to come down and meet with the Spring Hill leadership and offer suggestions to them as they were working through their RFP and trying to decide what kind of provider they were looking for and what was going to be the best provider for them. Working on digital literacy and that remote worker training, had a conversation just this morning. I'm dealing with workforce shortages throughout pretty much every industry. So it really does become a question of how do you make one job better or sexier than the other job, because our pool of people is limited. And so we really have to be trying to convince people to go one way or the other. But working with just folks like our adult education center, working with folks like our homeless shelter, to be doing digital literacy in those areas that are oftentimes overlooked. And we did a lot of begging. And I'm not above saying that we did a lot of begging. We made a lot of phone calls to a lot of national providers that pre-COVID weren't really interested in serving our area just because we were a higher cost service area. And it was a harder business case for them to be able to make. You know, dynamics certainly changed though in 2020. And one of the things that we did with the COVID money that came out from the feds through the state to us was we created strike teams that initially looked at how should that $6 million that was awarded to Miami County, how should it be spent? We ended up spending about a third of it on technology, digital literacy, and technology related programs. We hired a research group to come in and help us figure things out, because quite frankly, if the county was relying on me to be a broadband expert, we had a lot of issues. And we needed to figure out did we really know everything that was going on and who the players in our space were. And so we did research on that, figured out what their speeds were, started having conversations with them about helping them be bigger and better than where they were, what their speeds were, so that when grants came out, we had some relationships in place, could start talking to some folks. So we were then able to work with both MoCan Dial, who got almost $400,000 in one of the initial rounds of grants done through the Office of Broadband. They did work in our unincorporated area, and then worked with RG Fiber, who came in and did a significant amount of work within the city of Spring Hill. And so our role there was oftentimes helping them with demographics, helping them with their letters of support, helping them get the stories that told their story as to why they were needed and where they can really help. And then as that spark funding changed, we also used some of those dollars to fill the gap on some local projects. So we spent almost $80,000 with the city of Osawatomie to help them do some connections with QuickCom. We spent almost a little bit over $30,000. I have an extra digit in there. Spent a little bit over $30,000 though with the Paola School District to help them do some connectivity within some of their school districts. And then we did another round of grants with QuickCom in the city of Paola that really is bringing that expansion into the northern part of Paola. And then there was kind of that last big round of grants, the middle of last summer, that was most recently awarded $5.6 million to MoCan. And we actually worked with 5 different providers, had 15 different proposals done. If you look at the state's applications, we were a pretty significant chunk of the applications that they received. Worked on gathering data with them, letters, did a lot of social media push out, a lot of community and Rotary meetings, talking to people, trying to get them engaged. I was very grateful that by the time that we got to this point of things, I had started to develop relationships with some of the folks that are part of your group, Erin. Marlene Nagel in particular, Mid-America Regional Council was a great advocate for us and a great connector for us to help us be able to tell our story and to really be able to just get things in place with our relationships. We absolutely have had some growing pains though. Where do you target? Where do you start? particularly when you're working with elected officials and they have to say, we're going to target this area, but that's not my district. And some of those kinds of things. So in that big grant that we worked on, we really targeted the highest need area that also met some of the demographic things that the state was looking for. And so we really focused on that for the application. You know, we're having line cuts. We've got a lot of people working in right away. And so making sure that we're having good conversations with folks so that when that occurs, we're being able to share it. Quite frankly, lack of technical knowledge. Talked about that earlier. They were relying on me. While I've been in this space for a while and was very excited back in the 90s when I lived in Spring Hill and we got high-speed DSL and I was one of the first people turned on there as part of their demo. That was the 90s and it was time for us to know more and to be able to talk the language that the technical providers needed us to talk. And digital equity will always be there. It's one of those things that we have to constantly be aware of. We also have a very high level within Miami County of folks that are with special needs. And so we have to be particularly sensitive of that. And that's because of some of the social service providers that we have in our area. So we worked with the state of Kansas to do things and do speed test reports and make sure that we had folks participating in studies. When it came to the line cuts, we really had to come up with some different processes for right-of-ways and make sure that we were holding people accountable when they were working in there and were cutting other folks' lines. That lack of technical knowledge, we had to collaborate with other people in order to pull it off. And the digital equity is something that we will always just be working on. So as we continue to move forward, that lack of technical knowledge is something that as long as people are looking at me, I'm always going to be concerned about because I know just enough to be dangerous, but hopefully enough to get the right people in the room so that we can have conversations to look for some solutions. That digital equity, we have to figure out how we can monetize those lines that are getting put in the ground for somebody other than just the providers. And why I love our providers and I want them to have great business models and we need for them to make money so that they can put more lines in more places. We really need their customers to also be able to have that line be useful and to make their life better in other ways, whether that's greater income through jobs, side gigs, working from home, healthcare connections and things like that. And then the workforce, and I talked about that a little bit more. We're just going to need to figure out how to do some more training on both digital skills, but then also that side of things, which is getting things installed. And as part of all that, we have to be responsible partners. We have to be in the room. We have to be part of the conversations. We have to be good advocates for our area, good advocates for the state to help them get the funding that they need. And we also have to be good fiscal stewards. We can't expect folks to provide assistance to us if we're not doing things in the right way. And so those are really kind of the things that we've worked on. And I'm happy to answer any questions or add more where you'd like.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janet. That is such a great overview and kickoff, I think, to this conversation. Feel free to raise your hand on the Zoom, or you can stick questions in chat. I'll kind of be monitoring, especially as we get into the more interactive part of this, where we go to the provider panel. And so I will keep an eye out for that. So Mayor Berkey, would love to turn it over to you now, and sort of building on kind of Janet's long history in Miami County, dig a little bit more into Spring Hill's journey and sort of what your take on this issue has been, especially a little bit newer into office, but not necessarily new to the Spring Hill area. I will turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. So I've lived in the Spring Hill area for about almost 19 years now. And the entire time I've lived here, broadband internet has been a major issue. It's been a major hurdle. It's been with development, with businesses, getting commercial stuff in there, getting families in places where they just don't have high-speed internet. And we're in a unique city where, and Janet touched on it earlier, where we're 2/3 of our town is in Johnson County, and then 1/3 of it's in Miami County. And so that creates some some separate issues too with, especially when it came to trying to get providers to come here. They look at it as a good portion of our towns in Johnson County, and Johnson County just kind of has that stigma that they kind of have everything. They're one of the most populous county, the most populous county in Kansas. And so they, assume that we already have high-speed internet, that we don't have any technical issues like that. And so that was one of the big hurdles, I think, early on in the discussions on trying to get high-speed broadband internet here. I actually personally did a study about 5 years ago on high-speed internet and broadband. And at the time, may have been 6 years ago, but at the time, Spring Hill, the average here was about 4.6 megabytes per second. And the national average at the time was about 46.5. So we were actually listed in the top 10 as one of the slowest broadband speeds in the entire country for the size town we were. And so, as you can imagine, that's always hurt us with development and trying to grow, which, you have a business and they can't survive on that slow of internet speed, especially when they're transferring lots of information and stuff. So when I ran for office and campaigned and stuff, that was one of my big promises to the community, that I was going to do my best to try to work on that. And I know many others, including Janet, had been working on it for many years. And it's just something that's been a major hurdle for a long time. So, and then kind of back up a few years, RG Fiber was one of the companies here that, as Janet said, had gotten a grant and started some build out of some fiber here, and then they kind of ran out of capital, and so construction kind of stalled and stopped kind of halfway through, just kind of the beginning stages of some of the fiber there. And then they ended up, and then we had a few years ago, there was also an RFP out, and we had an RFP to build the entire town out in fiber, and that kind of got stalled as well. There was some politics in there, along with some other things that kind of stalled progressing forward on that. And so then it kind of was just at a standstill for a few years. So I knew that, along with other people, that we needed to do something about it. One of the things that spearheaded a little bit of it is I got a phone call from someone asking, I kind of spread the word out there when I campaigned, and then also just every day talking to people, that I really wanted to make this one of our highest priorities, was getting internet to this community. And so somebody had called me up and said, hey, we have, a national provider that's possibly interested in bringing high-speed internet to Spring Hill. Would you be interested in talking with them? And I said, absolutely. I was like, I'll talk with anybody that wants to bring high-speed broadband to this area. And so over the course of the next 6 months, we had multiple meetings, and that particular company decided they were going to go after some grants, and ended up deciding to use their own company capital to anywhere approximately between $10 and $15 million to build the entire city of Spring Hill out in high-speed fiber, and some of the surrounding areas outside of Spring Hill. So that was kind of a major deal. And there were a lot of people that worked on that, not just me. So we had a lot of people helping out with that. So that was kind of a huge deal for us. And then along with that, I think the competition factor, Clearwave, who bought RG Fiber, they kind of went through, and as this other company, Comcast, was coming in, Clearwave, I think, stepped up their game as well. And so I think that's ultimately had two companies going all around town. Berkey and Fiber has really created the competition where it's benefiting our citizens with prices and with service. So that was kind of the short history of the long issue that we've had for many, many years. So now we do have services going. With Clearwave, they've fired up quite a few customers, and then with Comcast, they expect it to be about a 2-year project, but they're actually way ahead of schedule. So they expect some of the first customers to be fired up in June. So that's been really exciting here. It comes with some growing pains, as Janet kind of alluded to. They've hit a few water lines and a gas line, and there were some issues going in there. And then along with that, for years, everybody complains about not having internet. And now you hear, the opposite end of that. Well, I don't want people digging up my yard, so having to juggle all those things while getting progress is a little bit of a challenge. But I think overall, the community is really excited that for once, it won't be crippling our community with not having, high-speed fiber internet here. So that's kind of a long story made short.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Questions for either Janet or Mayor Berkey. Okay, well, we'll have some for you as we hear from the providers. But
I have a question. I'm
oh,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just late in unmuting myself, Aaron. Sorry about that.
No
Hey,
worries.
I just want to know, just on behalf of the work that we do at PCs for People regarding devices, and particularly not just computers, but Wi-Fi hotspot devices, because I know we've collaborated with the KC Digital Drive in the past, right when COVID first hit, just to make sure, any assistance we could provide to people who were just needing even just short-term assistance getting connected. We provided some ways to do that. And I just want to make sure that in the context of everything that you're learning and getting support, both from the contacts you've made through the coalition, and I know you've both benefited a lot from working with Marlene in the Mid-America Regional Council, but to the extent you do need any support in the short term with any devices or particularly when it comes to hotspots and short-term internet, please let us know. We'll do whatever we can to help you out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. We actually had connected back at the start of doing some census work. And you were going to provide some stuff for us. And then obviously we ended up not having the public access for the census locations. But you're a great example of resources that we've been able to connect to through Mid-America Regional Council. And just, you guys have been great. I feel like you're from my family because you have been great networks. But as I mentioned yesterday, part of our problem is getting some of those resources that you guys offer to be more aware of in our local community. And so part of that is on us to make sure that we're doing that, but we just need to figure out a great strategy because Aisteen Village, Digital Drive are great resources for us to be taking better advantage of. And I think when I mentioned the leadership component of things earlier, that's where we really also need to be better developing our internal leadership capacity. So they're not always relying on me to be the great champion, because I appreciate that Marlene thinks I am a great champion, but I got other things to do too. And so I need other folks out there that are more aware of the things that you do.
Well, I really appreciate the comment, Janet. And listen, I'll get off my promotional soapbox here in a second, but one of the things we're finding for people that are just starting to see and hear the term digital equity, who maybe, even if they've seen it in the past, it just has never meant anything to them. And I'm talking about your average resident all the way to state legislators and business leaders, whatever. One thing that we're realizing, like I could have had a V8, but one of the things we're going to start upping the ante on generating more public awareness is, if you have an old computer sitting around your house and you want to donate it instead of sending it to a landfill or sending it to a for-profit recycler, organizing computer donation drives, and we're going to start distributing more containers that can be offered in public spaces for people to just businesses as well as individuals who can, feel like they're participating in part of the digital equity solution just by donating computers. So just something we're going to be working on in the next few months.
Well,
thanks for sharing that, Tom.
I just wrote a note to myself of about a dozen different people that I'll do an email when we're done to connect you with some local folks.
Great. Thanks.
Love it. Love the connections. So I want to get to our providers now, because we've got 4 different folks here and quite a bit of context. So you've heard from the public sector side, kind of what the struggle has been, and I'm just going to go through. We'll start with kind of intros. So we've got 3 or 4 providers depending on how you count, and that will make more sense in a minute. But Chase Custer, if you want to just give a little bit about yourself and who your company is and what your service area has been in this space, and then we'll get into a few more questions once we get the intros out of the way.
Sure. As you said, my name is Chase Custer. I'm the CFO for MoCan Dial or MoCan Communications. Is how we market in the area, and we're headquartered out of Lewisburg, Kansas, and are eager and happy to be part of the bringing fiber and broadband to the counties.
Great. Thank you. I will go to John Terry.
Hi, guys. My name is John Terry. I'm the Director of Customer Experience at QuickCom. We've actually been in the area since, I'd say 2012 or 2013. We provided broadband fixed wireless to a lot of the rural communities out there. And in the late 2010s, realized that fiber was desperately needed in some of the population centers. So we adapted our model and started working with the local communities there to get fiber out on an as-needed basis.
Great. David Soffer. So I'm not seeing David on. I think he was on earlier. So maybe maybe John, not to steal David's thunder, and I will need to go back and check email, but do you want to talk a little bit about WANRAC as well?
Yeah, WANRAC is actually a company that recently acquired QuickCom. We're now a division of WANRAC. WANRAC primarily did E-rate infrastructure and large fiber infrastructure builds for some of your cell carriers. So they were mostly a middle mile provider and we were a last mile provider. So we've basically bolted together now, and WANRAC continues to deliver the middle mile and we go build the last mile.
Great. Thank you very much. And Carly Werner.
Hi, thanks for having me. Carly Barger Werner. I am the Senior Director of Government Affairs for Comcast in the Midwest region. I am sure most of you are familiar with Comcast. We are the nation's largest gigabit broadband internet service provider, but we've had also a long standing service area in Kansas City. The metro area, not Kansas City proper, but Independence, Blue Springs, Raymore, that area. And then of course, Olathe in Kansas. And while we are a nationwide provider, we operate very locally. We've got, as Janet knows, she's probably sick of seeing us, but we partner very closely with the communities that we serve in terms of both access and adoption issues, and look forward to talking about that as the panel progresses.
Great. Well, thank you. And maybe we'll stick with you, Carly, for a minute and kind of go back through, but would like you to each talk. So you've heard sort of what the struggle and the journey has been. Talk from a provider perspective about why it has been such a struggle to serve or to provide the level of service that the communities feel like they need in these areas up until this point, or even ongoing if there's still challenges.
Sure. You know, and I can just speak from Comcast's perspective in that, you know, what we have done is continually invested in our networks, right? It's not a build and one and done situation. When you build a network, we continually look forward and try to anticipate, you know, what our customers need, because as we all know, usage increases of the internet, usage increases so much every year. And from our perspective, you know, what we've done is we've doubled our network capacity every 30 months. I mean, that's really, can I wrap your head around that? We've built 50,000 miles of new fiber since 2017. So it's just the expansion keeps going. And then I think what happened was, as we all know, COVID hit, right? And we have the ultimate test of, you know, we could say we're investing and we're looking forward and we're increasing capacity all we want. That never was tested like it was when COVID hit and everybody moved home and started working from home and going to school from home and seeing their doctor from home, etc. Right? And so we are proud to say, you know, the investments we made demonstrated that the world could change that quickly And as Americans, we could still participate in all the things I mentioned, and because we had built those strong networks. But then also what it exposed, right, was that areas that did not have that kind of strong network and that kind of investment were left, unfortunately, kind of on the sidelines or not as able to participate. And so, I think what we've seen happen, and it's been quite a change, right, is that the public sector that we've heard from, and we'll talk to, I'm sure, more, federal government, state governments, local governments, really, particularly the federal government, right, really saw that there was a partnership opportunity to finally build the access and look and partner for the first time on the adoption issue as well, because it did become, a national priority. And so I think, that hadn't happened necessarily as much before, but we are in this incredible time where that partnership is happening. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot more of that ability to expand into areas that,
Great.
costed, that were very expensive to serve before.
Thank you for that perspective. We do have David Soffer, who John, David talked a little bit about WANRAC, but would like you to introduce yourself and the question that I had posed. So we kind of heard from Janet McRae with Miami County and Mayor Joe Berkey in Spring Hill about the challenges their community had faced, and what we're starting to get into now is why it's been hard to serve these areas. From a WANRAC perspective, it's a little bit different because you guys have not typically gotten into the last mile piece. And so maybe as part of your introduction to yourself and an organization, you can talk a little bit about how that merger came about and where, WANRAC sort of sees that last mile piece going forward.
Sure. First of all, appreciate the time. Thank you for the invitation, Aaron. And sorry, ironically, got kicked out because my network reset randomly. Won't say who my provider is. It's not. Just my name's David Sofer. I've spent 15 years working federal, state, local government. Before WANRAC, actually worked for the Kansas Department of Commerce, where the broadband office is housed. So quite a bit familiar with the state's broadband policy and history. But WANRAC has kind of an interesting history in its own. We were founded 10 years ago by our CEO, really with the focus of providing anchor institutions with connectivity. Our thought process is a little bit different from the traditional provider in that we believe starting off with the anchor institution is a very valuable piece to a community and getting connectivity, even on the last mile piece, at a far more efficient rate than if you just kind of start building last mile as kind of your main focus. There are various federal programs out there that allow you to take advantage of building new networks for anchor institutions. So we historically have been in the E-rate space, providing connectivity to school districts. We provide a number of them in the Missouri and Kansas side. And so that was really our focus for the first, 5-6 years of our company as we built it from the ground up, was really, how do we continue to expand our connectivity for school districts? And so over the last couple of years, WANRAC was acquired by CBRE Infrastructure. And so what that really allowed us to do was kind of, what we felt always was the case was start with the school district, start with the hospital, start with the libraries, and then, we would handle the middle mile. And ultimately, we believe in open access and being able to lease fibers to last mile providers to provide that connectivity and ultimately fiber to the home. But as time has changed, and certainly we've been able to kind of adapt to what we're seeing, we ultimately decided to launch our own fiber to the home, solution. And so, we were actually, as part of the capital projects fund that Janet talked about earlier, we are going to be a provider up right around near Gardner for quite a few rural homes out there. And then ultimately our focus is really to kind of continue to expand out into South Johnson County. But we're going to continue to be the provider for anchor institutions, and John has mentioned, I don't know if John mentioned, but the QuickCom was acquired by WANRAC this year actually. And the reason being is QuickCom does a tremendous amount of work in rural communities. as a last mile provider for us. They really complement a lot of what we do. And so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to provide that last mile solution, do it at a, a much larger scale than we've been doing previously. But we also still believe that the key to providing last mile solutions to communities, also making sure the anchor institutions are connected. So we'll continue to be that solution provider for schools, for hospitals, for libraries. There's a tremendous amount of programs, as I mentioned, out there. I think it's important to make sure that every single anchor institution in the community is connected. And so if they've got to take advantage of those other funding available, not necessarily what people are traditionally talking about right now, which is BEAD, which is Capital Projects Fund. There have been programs out there for years to be able to take advantage of, and there's still funding available. And so from our end, we'll continue to do that. We still think that's incredibly important, and that's just a different approach for us. And we believe that approach works. But at the same time, we also believe there is an emphasis and a need right now to make sure we are addressing last mile needs. And that's certainly something we'll be able to do. And certainly being able to bring a successful company like QuickCom under the umbrella only emphasizes that and will only make us that much more efficient and be able to take on larger scale projects to provide last mile service.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. John, do you want to provide a little bit more just kind of on the QuickCom historical, where you guys have served and how you've chosen where to go and where not to go and what some of the challenges have been?
Yeah, we basically started in 2010 in Iola, Kansas, which was historically underserved. There was a cable provider here, but the coax cable plant was fairly out of date and the service was not excellent at the time. So we started deploying a broadband wireless product here, and it was successful, and we started to get inquiries from neighboring communities. So we expanded into those neighboring communities, and essentially from there grew out to neighboring communities through word of mouth. Hey, this service works. It's much better than what's available. And we grew pretty rapidly with our wireless product in the rural markets in Southeast Kansas. Started to come northward towards the metro to Miami County. We were getting calls from Paola and Osawatomie and some of the smaller towns in that community at the time. Hey, come up here. We have DSL. We have bad products here. As we got up there, obviously the writing was on the wall. Broadband wireless, while it's a great last mile solution, it's not the best solution. Fiber optic to the home obviously is. So we expanded into fiber optic building, started here in Iola, piloted a project where basically we learned by trial and error how to do it. We actually, one of the first places that we deployed fiber was to the Allen County Thrive organization, the economic development organization here in Allen County. They were nice enough to let us kind of do a test run, and we're our first fiber customer here in Iola. But from there, we basically, we partnered with Osawatomie to build the town of Osawatomie with fiber. We have fiber to the home in Greeley, Garnett. We are, as Janet mentioned, working on Paola right now. We have Iola finally fully covered with fiber optic internet. And we have some CPF grant awards in Franklin County and Osage County. Also a project in Lyon County that we're getting ready to start work on.
Great. And that's funny. I didn't realize was the ED at Thrive Allen County, David Toland?
At the time, yes.
At the time. So
yep.
That is the Kansas Lieutenant Governor, who is also the Department of Commerce Secretary and is where the broadband office sits. So it's kind of a nice full circle piece.
Right.
When you look at where we are now, I didn't realize that. That's neat. Chase, would love to hear a little bit more about kind of the barriers that MoCan has faced, and then kind of as the others have done, a little bit, sort of about what's changed and how you see the environment that's allowed you to expand what you're doing a bit.
Sure. We are a family-owned company. We've owned MoCan since 1994. We've serviced around 2,000 locations currently. One of the challenges historically of building out around our exchange is the high cost, and I think all of our all of our broadband providers today have spoken and touched on that, which is it's just expensive to build out in rural areas. And thankfully, the Miami County and some of Franklin County's been able to get some of their cities built out with fiber. But as you start branching out of the areas, it just becomes very, very difficult. So one of our successes has been we are essentially experts in the rural area. We traditionally are not in cities, we're not in big cities for sure. And then Lewisburg is one of the largest cities that we operate in. And as you guys saw, it was roughly 5,000 residents. So we're very, very familiar with the challenges of rural builds, rural projects, and then the need for federal and state support to augment private investment in those areas. So when COVID hit, we sort of became very engaged with the state and the county at that time, both the broadband director and the assistant broadband director at that time. And we had essentially a small project of roughly $400,000, as Janet touched on, that reached that sort of got our feet wet with state money and how the state projects would work. So that kind of full circle came into fruition in 2022 when we utilized that knowledge that we sort of incurred along the way, the partnerships that we created. I know Janet downplays her technological experience, but she is a powerhouse for the community and for the area. We utilized some of her census tools that she had at her disposal for sort of figuring out where these high need areas were. So Miami County has been one of it is the most unique county I've ever worked with, in the sense that a lot of counties understand they have a broadband need, but Miami County, with Janet leading the helm, came with solutions and ideas of how to bridge this gap. And so we've sort of ridden her coattails, and we've been as flexible as we can. The state's been phenomenal to work with. I know Morgan is on the call. I'd like to touch upon one sort of experience that sort of didn't work out in our favor, but shows the power of these future federal programs and state programs, which is we had been requested to do an addition on our fiber grant that was pending approval, that was sort of, this might be approved. Could you guys possibly build on this? There's likely to be more state support. And we did, and we built an extension on our Stanton area that was about $1.2 million. Through some machinations with the state and how their vendor sort of got communication, there was a little bit of a mix-up, and we were told, hey, there won't be any money for the addition. We'd still love to fund the Stanton project. And so by that time, we had kind of run the numbers, and we are actually ourselves committing to that $1.2 million addition in and around Stanton ourselves. But all I'm going with that, or where I'm going with that, is that these projects have allowed private investment in areas that would not have ever seen private investment from our company. I'm assuming that John and David can kind of speak a little bit on that as well, where once you kind of have a layer built, you can expand on that much easier. So we're extremely optimistic about the future. We're incredibly happy to be part of the community and to be deploying fiber in and around Miami County. So love to field any questions or provide any more details as requested.
That's great. That's great. Thank you all for this perspective. So we've got I've got a couple more questions for you, but I kind of want to tee up a little bit of a larger issue as we've kind of been putting this together. And just to give, we've got a half hour left of our time. We'll take the last 10 minutes for some community announcements, and we'll give Morgan Barnes about 5 or 10 minutes kind of after we're done with this provider piece. So heads up to people out kind of in the audience. If you've got questions, again, please put them in chat so that we can get to them in a timely manner. But the place I want to go kind of now, and I think Morgan will react to this, and also Joe and Janet, would welcome your reflections here. There's a real challenge, right? In terms of, I mean, you've got this big area, and so on the one hand, and it's not real densely populated, and it's easy to kind of look at it and be like, oh, well, there's some, an area over here, an area over here, an area over here, and for a long time nobody's covering anything, and then once there gets to be a certain amount of density, and the business case makes sense, or there's enough money available, then maybe multiple people are interested in serving that area. And I think from a community perspective, we all want to see competition. We want to see more people. It's better, for us to have, people kind of competing for service. And yet the economics of that are tough. And there's just not, necessarily enough business to support. Maybe there is to support 2 providers, but maybe not to support 3 or 4, or whatever that looks like. And so you've got both the state broadband office and your local officials who are trying to figure out from the community standpoint, how do we meet the need? And there's this tension between, okay, what's the best solution? And we know our community and we want to come up with that solution. But, we also don't want to pick winners, and we want to let kind of people duke it out and figure out what they want. And so as they go through the kind of the grant side from the state, as well as the work that, I know, Janet, you've talked about, getting everybody in a room and trying to figure out who wants to go where. I would love to hear, both from the public sector and the private sector side, how you engage in that process, in this sort of, let's bring a lot of folks together, and we know that you're competitors, but you also, or that you're potential competitors, but you also are community people, especially I think in the the rural telco business, or some of the smaller providers that are really community grounded, family owned companies that have grown up to serve needs in their community. How do you navigate that landscape, I guess, first of all, and what do you wish maybe that was different in how that plays out? And I'm gonna I'll let you guys raise hands, because I'll call on somebody if nobody jumps. But if anyone wants to address that, would love to hear kind of how you think through that. David, I saw you come off mute.
Sure. I saw Janet have her hand up. So totally your call. So, but from a provider sense, it's interesting because I've worked from the state side when we were first kind of putting together the first broadband grant. If people remember, back in 2020, we put together Surge, which was the first broadband grant for the state of Kansas. It was $50 million, and we were kind of rushing to address a broadband need that the state obviously had from years of just not putting anything together. And with COVID happening, there was a huge rush to get things done. And certainly now working from the private side of things, I've been able to see both sides of it. I guess, from the provider side, what I would say is that there's a few things that we do. Of course, the federal funding is of great assistance, and that helps make business cases in areas where otherwise there are challenges, especially in rural communities, to get 100% private backed funding. So that's certainly a piece of it. But I do think there really is a valuable tool that Janet talks about, is that getting everybody together and getting everybody on the same page. It really is a big deal. And it's not just at the beginning of the process and trying to make sure that all, the elected officials are on the same page, or local officials and whatnot. It also goes as far as, if a local community is working with a provider, it's helping to speed up permitting. It's helping gain access to rights of way. There's a whole host of items that local communities can help with, that help bring down the cost for a provider, but it don't necessarily cost the community much, if anything at all. And those are what we would call, I guess, more in-kind contributions, but those do help tremendously as far as being able to help bring that business case forward. And so I think, being able to get a community on board and working together with a provider is incredibly important. And I think that's a big part of the process. But on top of that, it's that continual work until the completion of a project. And then, of course, from the provider side of things, it's being a partner in that community, as you talked about, Aaron. I think it's really important that any provider looking to serve a community, but especially, a smaller community, there's, as you're looking to drive up adoption rates and being able to, work on digital literacy and other key components, I think there has to be a trust factor involved. And so I think a big part of that is being a community partner and being involved in that community. I know that's something WANRAC focuses in on, and I know other providers do as well. And so that's a big piece of it. So I think you need a little bit of everything, and but I think a lot of those items that I just talked about are a really big piece as far as being able to address some of those business case concerns that certainly us providers face.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tag team on that just a little bit. I think that's one thing we've been able to do as a smaller community, has been able to, between our public works department and then also our permitting, has been able to speed up and accelerate the process of permits, right-of-way permits, that whole entire process, to where we've been able to work hand in hand with the providers to really, spearhead that process to where that's not a holdup for them. Because I know that's a lot of times where that is, the contractors here, the weather's good, we're ready to go, but we're waiting on permits. So we've really accelerated that and put a focus on that. And that's enabled, like for instance, Comcast to put, here in the last few weeks, they've been able to put 20 to 25,000 feet per week of fiber in the ground, which is a pretty quick speed. And that's all due to not only their hard work, but also the processes that we've put in place to help them and kind of eliminate some of the roadblocks that keep them from being able to, get work done quickly.
And from a local perspective, is that something that you offer to anyone? I mean, is it kind of like, hey, if you want to build here, this is what we can offer you, or does it require a little bit more of the partnership building and understanding of who you're working with and relationship before you're able to say, okay, here's how we can make life easier for you?
Gotcha. I think it's a little bit of both, but there's definitely both companies that are laying most of the fiber here we've had a great partnership with them. And that was one of the things we were willing to do. You guys give a little, we'll give a little. If you can, commit to be a great partner with us, we'll do what we can on the permitting side and on our side to really make the process as smooth and, as painless as possible. And so, they've both been really great to work with, and it's really benefited us and sped up, what was thought to be a 2-year, project is, probably been almost cut in half. So.
Great. Janet?
And then I was going to say, I would jump in. I think any of those dig once initiatives where if something's going in and we can put in fiber at the same time, and we've got fiber partners looking at the area, I think that's important. But I'm also not Pollyanna, right? And I think all of this was much easier to get providers in a room and kind of divvy up areas and communities probably 3 or 4 years ago than it's going to be this next time around. Because we have more national providers who are interested, who probably have less of that local connection to us, that are seeing some of the dollars. And so they don't, we still have a national provider in our community where if you need to return your remote controller, get it replaced, it's a 2-hour drive because they don't have anything local, and that's okay. And now you have these other folks coming in that are really forming relationships and partnerships and know their peers, and have kind of adjusted some boundaries and some of that. And so, I think there's some of those things that are going to make this next round tougher for local jurisdictions. And so that's where, as I look to Morgan and the folks at the broadband office, that technical expertise, because we can talk about who has local employment, who has local investment, who's given to the robotics club, who's had those connections. But I also don't know this widget from that widget and which one is more efficient and works interconnectivity to help something else down the road make sense. And so that's where I really think in the next round of grants, it's going to be important for them to provide some technical assistance to us, because I don't think the state wants to be picking winners or losers either. And we don't want to pick the winners or losers either. And I think that there's going to be both of us looking at each other saying, Janet, why did you have 15 applications for one county from 5 different providers? Narrow it down to 1 or 2. I don't have the technical skills to do that. I'm also not certain that I've got the political interest in doing that from my elected officials who would be the ones to do it. So our strategy really the last time around was anybody who did an application, the state was looking for a local commitment. We put all of my in-kind stuff and cheerleading and all that in there. But we also said $10,000. That was the county's commitment. So with the exception of Comcast, because Comcast did a countywide solution is what they were looking at. It was a tiered approach, some other stuff. So we were doing 20,000 on that. But then any of the applications that MoCan put in, I think they had 5 or 6, we were willing to contribute $10,000 on each of those that got approved. We were
That's
able
great.
to leverage our $10,000 investment into a $5.7 million grant for them and probably $3 million on their end for corporate contribution. That's a pretty good return on investment of some COVID money that we have.
So Janet, a couple questions have come up in chat. One, I think is pretty quick, and it's about the consultants that you hired and whether that is just around sort of broadband and infrastructure, or whether you have a consultant that you're working with on, you know, digital equity more broadly and healthcare, mental health, digital workforce, things like that.
Yeah, so the consultant that we worked with initially simply was data, speeds, availability providers. When it comes to the consultant that for that last part of things, I would say my consultant is Marlene Nagel with Mid-America Regional Council, participating in a lot of the programs that she's had, the study that she's had. Then also the state of Kansas has somebody who's been doing some state data from there. So we did not hire really a consultant for that last part. We did have our local strike teams that, and one of them was centered on connectivity, digital equity, some of that. We had our county mental health providers and those folks who were on that strike team. So they had been involved, but yeah, no, Marlene, she was my consultant on that one.
So thank you. And I think this is a good tee up for Morgan. And before we get to Morgan, there's a comment from Jill Joliker in chat. And Jill, you may, putting you on the spot a little bit, although you sort of volunteered by commenting in chat, because you are in some ways the audience. You know, I'm glad this was useful for you, thinking about how other, you know, counties or cities that are trying to do this can operate both with this local context that we've heard, but also what the state wants. So people can read Jill's comment in chat, but if you have any question or sort of thinking on this that you'd like Morgan to think about, putting everybody on the spot here, as she gives her remarks, you know, in terms of what Douglas County maybe should do, would love just kind of a thought how this sits with you as another county official.
Yeah, sure. I would say that we've been paying attention to issues of digital equity since the pandemic. And I think, you know, we saw digital inequities profoundly in our urban parts in Lawrence. I'm in downtown Lawrence. And we saw, and we really focused on those first and foremost. So thinking more comprehensively throughout the county. We haven't thought about that as much until our planning and zoning department, you know, in the last couple of years started thinking about it more, because they're hearing from more of our citizens out in the rural community, and then there's funding available and all that. So it's, for us, it's more just been like, where do we start and what is our role, and how much money is reasonable for us to think about investing, and what's the, you know, what does that cost share look like? What are the investments that we can prioritize? I don't know if it was in one of these previous meetings of this group a couple years ago, but there was a really great presentation by the unified government about how they thought about, they had like 3 priority areas, I think, for how they would make investments, and it was around public safety, economic development, and health and well-being. And that was really valuable for us to start thinking about this, but we just haven't had time. But so it's always good to look, I think, at what other communities are doing, and as a starting point. And I would just second that Mid-America Regional Council and Marlene are always like such great resources in this work. But yeah, we'll be checking in with Janet, and using the EDC umbrella, I think, is a safe way for us to engage, because that doesn't put us too much on the hook to be solving all the problems in this space.
That's great. Thanks.
Let me just
Thanks so much
jump
for
in.
that context. Yeah, quickly, Carly, because I want to make sure we've got a bit to get through. So yeah, but go ahead.
Sure. Just going to say, I think what's highlighted here is the conversation or the dialogue between providers and these localities and the EDCs it's just been tremendous. And I think that is the most important place to start, is talking to your provider. Certainly with Mayor Joe's example in Spring Hill, I mean, it's really just been an absolute partnership. And it's going to be, with all this work going forward and all the kind of how competitive this is all going to be, it's really coming down to picking the provider, that works for you, but really having those dialogues and those conversations.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and a good lead in, Morgan, because this has been a deep dive into one plus a little bit county situation, and we have 100 some counties that you're trying to manage a massive planning and disbursement project that have all of these local dynamics, times 100. How do you do it, and what do you want to tell us?
Well, thanks, Aaron. It's amazing, right? 105 counties. How do we do it? You all are doing it. Carly and Janet and Joe and Jason, all the providers on the call, they're talking about it. What you do is you find those partners. You've got to look outside, right? Janet has built a great network of champions and connections within the community, and she's got a great community to do that. Some of our more rural spaces are really struggling with who their champions are and what that looks like. But to do these projects, it takes all of us, right? There's not a provider out there or a community that doesn't want to serve or be helpful in this space. So I think these conversations are critical and key. And when Janet brought everyone into the room together, right? Transparency. This is what we need specifically. How can we get there? I think those are key things, right? Our office is really focused on future-proof technology, right? We want to make sure we put something in the ground or out there in the community that lasts. So our commitment is that we want affordability, scalability for these projects. But also, I think you hit it on the head. We don't want to pick the winners, right? I try to think of we do, but we want to know what's best for your community, right? My example, as I was trying to think about this, was you do not want me picking a puppy for you, right? Like your ideas of what you need and what I desire for a puppy might be two separate things, right? So this is where this community consult and these conversations and this long-term plan is key. We acknowledge it's hard, right? This is important work that we're doing and you're building forward. So know that we hear you, we see you, and we do want to be resources in that, and we understand that it is a partnership. Is that helpful?
It's fantastic. Thank you.
Yes.
We've got probably a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we reserve our last 5 for our community announcements. But if there are other questions or comments, please go ahead and add to the chat, and we will direct them accordingly. Give folks a minute or two. Well, thank you all. And we've got 10 minutes. So if something comes up to you, you can still put it in chat and we will get back to it, but we'll go ahead and do some of these announcements now. And I think we first have Alan Spell from MU Extension, who is going to speak a little bit about the Missouri Broadband Survey.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks for all the great information here today. And so just as background for maybe some of those who jumped on a little bit later, I'm with the University of Missouri Extension. And as part of a 4-campus effort to help with the state's efforts in broadband expansion, we have several projects going on that we're working with our Missouri Office of Broadband Development. And I wanted to make you aware of a survey that we have going on. And of course, Kansas City, the metro, goes across 2 great states, but this is focused on the Missouri side. But the thing we're trying, and I put a link there in our chat with the MU Extension release, is we're trying to do a short anonymous survey of as many adult Missourians as we can to understand issues around accessibility, around training that's needed, around adoption information that is that's helpful as we have this historic investment in broadband. And as a state, we're trying to make sure that digital equity is part of that. And how do we get feedback from our citizens? So to that end, we've got over 6,000 responses right now in terms of total survey responses. So we're in fairly good shape. We have about a month left to gather information. But the reason I think it's really important to make you folks aware of this is that we really want to hear from populations that a lot of times get undercounted in surveys and that we don't hear enough from. And so, for example, we want to hear from lower income households. We want to hear from non-white households. We want to hear from households that have people who are formerly incarcerated or that have limited English speaking abilities. So those are things that are important for us to get a good number of responses in these areas so that we can, when we do report some of the findings from the survey, that they're statistically significant, that they're enough to actually draw some good conclusions from. So just wanted you to please take a look at that link. If you know people in your network that you could help share this message with, we have flyers that are easy to print in black and white to put on doors and walls. I've been in touch with a lot of state colleagues. I used to work for the state of Missouri, so Department of Corrections and Department of Social Services. So we're going everywhere we can to get numbers, especially Kansas City, St. Louis. You've got obviously huge populations, and so just wanted to make you aware of that. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email. But I thank you for the platform today.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good kind of reminder. Morgan, you may want to talk about the Kansas survey as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aaron. And thanks, Alan, for the reminder. We love surveys, right? That's the best way to gather data and make sure we're making good informed decisions. So Kansas Office of Broadband has several surveys going on right now. We have a community survey that we are asking everyone to fill out to share information on their internet. So this is one that's happening and showing out via the roadshow. So we have it in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Dropping that link in there for English, but it is on our website as well, the Kansas Broadband Roadshow and the broadband planning site. I'll drop Spanish in there too, just for fun. But I would also share providers know we're sending out a provider survey, so look for that still. That's exciting. We're excited to hear responses there. And then also we are sending out a digital equity asset mapping survey to community, community champions, economic development groups, libraries, to make sure that we are mapping assets available in the community that track digital equity. So those are a few things that are happening from the Kansas Office of Broadband, but I appreciate the survey situation. I know the ones I dropped in the chat, they might take a minute and a half. So it's really not difficult. Share it with everyone if you don't mind. I've sent it out all over the interwebs. So any support you can provide there, really appreciated. And yeah, if you have questions, always reach out. We're happy to support you in any way.
Great, thank you. One quick announcement that I'm going to make on behalf of the Missouri Broadband Office, who couldn't make the meeting today. Are you seeing the agenda or the sorry, I think I need to exit the screen share. The Missouri State Broadband Office has made an announcement of their digital STEM demonstration grants, and we have having difficulty getting that onto my screen.
Your demonstration.
Sorry.
I
see it. Oh, you do? Okay, good. So several coalition members are beneficiaries of this, including us at Digital Drive. Our project is to take the KC Goes Tech program and do it elsewhere in rural Missouri. Essential Families, Ken Yancey is on the call. Esteem Village with William Wells also both have demonstration projects, as well as the city of Kansas City, Missouri, I guess is working with Ken. They're the awardee, and the University of Missouri has several projects as well. So you can find this info out on the internet. There is another set of grant awards that has been made. I know Marlene was on earlier and has gotten lots of nice comments because she's been a great advocate for this work from Mid-America Regional Council. They were charged with expending some money from the COVID relief fund that was set up in Kansas City. And I don't know if that list has been published yet. So we will work with her to get that out. I think that will be in our newsletter that comes out next week, but I do believe all those awards have been made.
Aaron, she made notifications last week. So I'm not sure if the list is out, but I will say that we have $70,000 to 3 different groups coming from Miami County, so we appreciate those.
Oh, great. Yeah. I think there are a number of folks on this call. So I thought she had, I know she texted me and said that she had a conflict come up, and so wasn't gonna be able to sit around and make them, but I think she was hoping to make an announcement here, but I think we'll see that full list. And that is exciting to have more resources devoted to this work. There's another announcement in the chat from Tony Lupino. Thank you. About the digital equity activist workshop that he and the folks from Esteem Village and some others have been coordinating. That is next Friday, April 21st at the Bluford Library. And finally, we've got an announcement from Sarah Muley with Verizon, who Verizon is a longtime coalition member, but Sarah, I think, was on the call for the first time maybe last month or the month before. And had an announcement to make as well. Sarah?
Thank you, Aaron. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me, Aaron. Like he was mentioning, my name is Sarah Muley. So I lead Verizon's external relations in the KC area with our elected officials and organize our community engagement works and so forth. And just wanted to share with you guys an announcement that we have affecting the KC educational community to shore up the digital equity gap in the metro, which is one of Verizon's CSR pillars that we focus on. We're excited to announce that 3 public schools in the KC Public Schools District have joined what we call our Verizon Innovative Learning Schools program, Paseo Performing Arts, Central Middle School, and Central High School. And so this will impact approximately 1,500 kids in the metro area. And as a part of the program, they receive devices, internet access. They're provided with wraparound support so that their teachers are trained on digital skills and technology coaches. And just some history on the program. It started about a decade ago. It's a national program. It's impacted 600 schools now from the program's inception to now. We have 32 schools joining the 2023 cohort. So these 3 schools are part of that cohort. We strategically target Title I schools. So there's a whole process that they work with. The nonprofit is called Digital Promise. So it's a needs-based and equity-based premise to be considered eligible for the cohorts. I'm going to slide a link to the website that if anybody wants to see if their school is eligible or connect it with local educators to be potentially considered for next year's cohort, they can apply directly through that Digital Promise website. This is the first impact to the KC area, but just for historical context, again, around Kansas, we do have 17 schools in a prior year's cohort out in Wichita. So really proud to bring this to the KC area. I know Wichita's educators and education community has already been receiving the benefits of this. It's all part of what we call Citizen Verizon, which is our corporate goal to educate and provide 10 million youths with digital skills and training by the year 2030. So I will slide that link into the chat for anyone that wants to share that with their education community. Thanks for allowing us some time today to share that with you all. Thanks, Aaron.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you again. Thanks, Pam Rooks, for introducing Catholic Charities. Thank you, Joe, Janet, Chase, David, Carly, John, and Morgan for providing such great context on our topic. Our next meeting will be the first Friday in May. We're going to be back to first Fridays, May 5th. We haven't finalized the agenda yet, but we are looking at a little bit of a deep dive into CBRS as a technology solution to help with access problems, that citizen band radio service. And so we're putting that together, and I think it should be great content. So thank you everyone for joining. We will see you all next month.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye, guys.